Alright, so now we have some functions and a graph, and we want to understand what happens when we try to transform these functions. In other words, if I change the equation to a function, how is that going to affect the graph? And I've written some definitions here of function translations. And so first we look at the horizontal translation. If we have f of x minus c, so that means wherever you see x, you replace it with this expression, f minus c. It's actually going to move the graph to the right by c units. If I have a function and I transform it by going f of x plus c, it actually is going to move the graph to the left by c units. So let me just demonstrate here. I have a graph right here of f of x equals x squared. And let's see what happens when I change this function and I replace x squared with, let's say, x minus 4. Okay, enter. And you can see that the graph just shifted over from the original parabola. It moved over 4 units to the right. And just for comparison, let me just graph the original function again so you can see. Okay, so in the black here I have the original function, and in the blue it's the original function with the translation of x minus c. Okay, and that's just to prove the second concept here. What happens when I make it plus 4? Okay, so instead of a minus 4 I have a plus 4. The graph moves 4 units to the left. Okay. And you can also see, watch what happens to this black graph as I slide it to the right. Okay, the further I slide it to the right, it's actually subtracting the value. And the further I slide it to the left, it's adding values. If I go past the y-axis, it's actually adding values, and it's going to keep on adding until if I get to here, it's perfectly lined up. Okay, so if I add a number to the x, it's going to move it to the left, and if I subtract a number from it, it's going to move it to the right. Okay, and let me just close these out for right now, so that we can, so we're going to look at the function x squared here, and let's look at what happens to the vertical translations. Now, if you recall in this function notation, when I have the plus c outside of the parentheses, it just means to add the constant to the end of the function. So instead of using x squared, I'm going to have x squared plus 4. Okay. And oops, that disappeared off of there. But let me just zoom out here so you can see what just happened to the function. So you can see here that the function jumped up or moved up 4 units. And let me just put the original function back in again so we can compare. Okay. Really quick, let me make it a different color. Okay. So this red here is the original function, and now that I've shifted it up 4 units by adding 4 to it. And let's see what happens when I decide to go with minus 4. You can see here that the graph has been shifted down 4 units. Okay. And so similarly, let's try this again. When I click on the original function and I decide now to slide it up and down. So let me pick the original function. Watch what happens here to x squared as I slide it down. So the further I slide it down, the values become negative. And as I move it up, the values become closer and closer to 0. And as I move it up even more, it's adding to it. So if I add something to the end of the function, it's going to move it up by that many units. And if I subtract something from the end to the end of the function, it's going to move it down by that many units. Now that's a little bit different from the horizontal translation. This is saying I replace x with x minus c. So let me put all 3 of these functions up again, just so you can see. And let me also make this red one here my original function again. Let's make this one just x squared. Okay. So I have here 3 different things. The red, whoops. Okay. I have the red function here, that's the original. I have the blue one that's been horizontally shifted, and I have the black one that's been vertically shifted. So watch again. If I move the blue further to the left, you can see that I'm actually adding a positive value. But if I look at the the vertical shift, and move it down, it gets negative, and I move it up, it becomes closer to 0, and then it becomes positive. And that's what these rules are trying to illustrate.